क्षणम् भक्ताभीष्टवराभयप्रदकरम् कौपीनमात्रोज्ज्वलम् स्वात्मानन्दरसानुभूतिविवशम् सर्वानवद्याङ्गकम् श्रीमन्तं श्रीरमणीश्वरं गुरुवरं योगासनाध्यासितम् ध्यायेत् श्रीरमणीश्वरम् ध्यायेत् श्रीरमणीश्वरम् ध्यायेत् श्रीरमणीश्वरम् हृदयकुहरमध्ये केवलं ब्रह्ममात्रं यहमहमिति साक्षादात्मरूपेण भाति हृदि विषमनसा स्वं चिन्वतामज्जतव पवनचलनरोधात् आत्मनिष्ठो भवत्वम्। Namo Ramana. In the Friday Satsangh, we usually meditate on Bhagavan's Upadesham, and we have been reading his Upadesham from the book Self-Enquiry. Ramana answers Self-Enquiry 1900 to 1950, a compilation of all the answers given by Bhagavan on the questions put to him related to Atma Vichara. And this wonderful compilation has been done by our founder, President Sri A.R. Natarajanji. We have been looking at the question and answers put to Bhagavan between 1936 to 1950. After reading his Upadesham for the week, we usually meditate on it for 10 to 15 minutes by his grace, and then have a 20 minutes Atma Vichara session. Following that, we have our President Sarada Akka talking about Atma Vichara as it has been contemplated in Ramana Gita by Ganapati Muni. And finally, we have the concluding prayers to Bhagavan. In this week's question and answer that we are looking at, we have arrived at the 77th question. And the devotee asks Bhagavan, is it enough if I spend some time in the morning and some time in the evening for this self-enquiry? Or should I do it always, say even when I am writing or walking? This is a common thought process as sadhakas that we come upon. Am I doing enough sadhana, or it has to be continuous, or is it going to be with lot of breaks? If you are serious about the self-enquiry, these are going to be a common question. Even if we are not, we may find ourselves that this question rising in us, asking about how much we have taken self-enquiry as an important means for our spiritual journey. So, I feel the devotee has put this question on behalf of all of us, and it is so beautifully being brought to us by Natarajan Mama for us to even contemplate. So let us look at Bhagavan's answer, a very beautiful answer which we will meditate upon. Bhagavan says, No one will inquire into the source of thoughts unless thoughts arise. So long as you think I am walking, I am writing, inquire who does it. These actions will, however, go on when one is firmly established in the self. Does a man always say, I am a man, I am a man, I am a man, every moment of his life? He does not say so, and yet all his actions are going on. I'll read Bhagavan's Upadesham once again. No one will inquire into the source of thoughts unless thoughts arise. So long as you think, I am walking, I am writing, inquire who does it. These actions will, however, go on when one is firmly established in the self. Does a man always say, I am a man, I am a man, I am a man every moment of his life? He does not say so, and yet all his actions are going on. Here, Bhagavan has given us the culmination of the self-enquiry in a way, what it brings about. And he is also saying, as sadhakas, where we need to recognize we are still in the sadhana phase. And what we need to do is just continue with self-enquiry until our identification is firmly established as the self. So Bhagavan is saying here, no one will inquire into the source of thoughts unless thoughts arise. If a thought arises and if it disturbs us or if it grabs our attention and makes us go continuously in a stream of thoughts, causing a lot of bewilderment in ourselves, when the thoughts appear as what in Sanskrit they call bhada, it starts to disturb the peace. Then only we become little worried about the thought or the thing that has caught our attention. So Bhagavan is saying is, so long as there are thoughts, we should inquire, because as there is thought, since there is a thought, there is the thinker behind it. That means there has arisen a separate identity, a division, that I am not the self, but I am an individual identified with this body and mind and this frame, and thinking some object or some objectiveness is very important rather than the self. Therefore, if I am thinking, then I need to inquire. Like if you think I am walking, I am writing, or I am doing anything, or I am thinking, anything which makes us identify ourselves with a division, a separate identity, wherein which we need to inquire, because that attention, if we continue giving our attention to that division, if we start to entertain that division, that is when it starts to create more and more trouble for us. This is the fundamental thing the Bhagavan is trying to teach us through Atma Vichara, where there is absolutely no division. This fundamental and foremost division called I, the thinker, when he rises and continues to identify with all the actions of the body, mind, intellect, and the world as though it is happening to him, and he has a say on all of it, and he wants to deal with it either positively or negatively, and therefore keep up the division where absolutely there is no division. A simple analogy which the, the traditional philosophy gives us is it the sand which has become a pot. It is the sand which has become, or the clay which has become a pot, which is the clay which has become a utensils. If you break the clay, it is nothing but, if you break the pot, or if you break the utensils, it is nothing but the clay. But because of the new identity the clay has got, if it starts to think I am a pot, or because everybody uses it as a pot to carry water or curd or whatever it is required, if it starts identifying with it, that means if we start to identify how this body continues to function in this universe, it has been brought for a purpose. It has been brought to do software development. It has been brought to be a father. It has been brought to be a son. It has been brought to be a husband. It has been brought to do something like anything in the nature. A cloud would appear in the sky. We don't know why it has appeared, right? It will shower its rain and it moves on. And we don't much question, oh, why this particular cloud has been only for a few hours. Like that, there are so many things in nature which are there for few minutes, few hours, few days, few years. Like that, this entity, which is also nothing but the self, has taken a form, like a clay has been taken a form of a pot. The self has taken this form and it is performing something which is in the self, for the self, and it is going on. But in between this rises a phantom entity which is not there, which we call as the ego, which creates a separateness by taking this form to be separate from that one self which is there, and therefore creates this separateness, and then starts to interpret all that is happening to this one as separate event for or against it, and goes on, tries to collect lot of data, interpret data, and continues to engage, causing bewilderment. That's when we ask this question: should we continue to do this Atma Vichara morning? Then to whom is this morning, evening, and night? It is only when I am identified with this body, I see it as a morning, I see it something as evening, and something as night, and something that I can do with the free will that I see that it is there with me. And therefore, I start identifying with this division. And Bhagavan is saying, if this is happening, we are in the stage of sadhana. We should recognize that the sadhana is yet to happen, yet to continue. And with all of this division, we only have to do one thing: to whom is this? To we not to get back to the self that we verily are, to let go this division which has imaginarily got created. The sadhana here is not to become the self, because we identify so strongly with the non-self, with this division. We think that we have this division has to get united, but actually what exists is the unity. This wrong imagination of separation is the only thing that we need to let go. And that's why Bhagavan asks us, to whom is this? Enquire. And therefore brings about, therefore when we ask this question, to whom is this, who am I? We are recognizing the ever-present unity. We are only letting go of the imaginary division. The unity is self-established. It cannot be removed. It cannot be altered. It is as it is. It is this wrong idea or a wrong imagination that we are separate from it has arisen because of our wrong identity with the division. And Bhagavan therefore says, whatever has arisen on top of it, like I am walking, I am thinking, I am writing, then inquire. Then the sadhana has to be done only to let go the imaginary division, not to regain the self. This is very clear in Bhagavan's teaching. He goes on to say that we are all nothing but the self alone. This is an amalgamation of the clay which has become everything. All the different pots, all the different vessels. There is no need for the vessels to do any effort to become a clay. It It is very much a clay. Every bit of it is a clay. But the division, which is an imaginary thing, which is not anything which is which is hard and fast, which that's why Bhagavan says, can you bring and show me your mind? Because it is not there. It is just an imaginary thought. That has to be let go, and therefore the sadhana. So as sadhakas, our only job is to let go the imaginary division, and Atma Vichara is definitely the direct way, because very much as soon as we question to whom is this, who am I, and trace the I back to its source, here and now we see that we are the self, and this imaginary division was only superficial. Further, Bhagavan goes on to say what happens naturally, which is Bhagavan's teaching. We can meditate on it probably next week. But what Bhagavan is saying in the second paragraph is that, like, if I am identified with the pot, I don't go on saying I am carrying water, I am carrying milk today, I simply carry it as a pot. I am very clearly identified with it. Similarly, when I am identified with the clay, I need not have to say that I have become a pot, or I am the clay, I am the clay. I know that I am the clay. Like that, in the self, because self is everything, it doesn't have to claim that I am now the self, I am now the self, and I have amalgamated everything as myself. It doesn't have to make a claim, which Bhagavan says in Ashtakam very beautifully in the second verse. When he saw Arunachala put a question, who saw it? And Bhagavan says, there rise no thought to say I saw it. Would there be a thought to say that I did not see it? So it is. The self is everything. What would it rise and claim, and to whom would it rise and claim? I have now recognized what is self, and I have recognized what is non-self. If it claims, then is it identified with the self, or is it identified with the non-self? That is the question fundamentally that we have to inquire into. So Bhagavan is saying very beautifully here that, like, how the actions will go on, as we saw in the analogy of the cloud, it has come for a purpose, it will do its purpose, and it will go away. Like that, all the actions of the body, mind, intellect will go on when we recognize we are the self. When we recognize we are the substratum on which all this dance is happening, or we are the support of that whole thing, rather we are everything that we are talking about, there is no more going to be this doubt that I am separate and that is separate. So when that becomes clear, there is no more an entity to rise and say that I am in the support of this, or I am not in the support of this. It will be like the sun in whose light everything happens naturally. We will meditate on the second paragraph next week more in detail by His abundant grace. So Bhagavan has brought us Atma Vichara here to eradicate the imaginary division, but that's all. He is not trying to bring about the self. The self is our real nature. So repeatedly, whenever the imaginary division has been given a reality, as through the subject-object divide, Bhagavan asks us to diligently inquire, to whom is this? And recognizing it is I who has raised as a subject, as a separate entity, and object as separate from me, for me to look at it, that division has been created. He asks us to diligently inquire, to whom is this? Who am I? And therefore bring back that self that we verily are, where there is no such object-subject divide, by letting go this division then and there with the inquiry. And with repeated practice, Bhagavan assures that the self alone remains and shines until it becomes our natural experience, as our identification with this body is so strong, so much our identification with that self becomes. We should diligently inquire, says Bhagavan, with the immense grace of Bhagavan. For the next 20 minutes, let us do Atma Vichar.
Namo Ramana, prostrations to Ramana, shining as a self in all beings. By the immense grace of the self, manifest as Ramana, in this part of the satsang, we are meditating on the verses, the teachings of Bhagavan as encapsulated in the Ramana Gita. Ramana Gita is answers by Bhagavan Ramana to questions posed by Ganapati Muni and many of his disciples like Daivarata, Karshni, Yoganatha and others, and they are recorded by the Muni. These answers of Bhagavan are recorded by the Muni in Sanskrit and compiled in 18 chapters on the lines of Bhagavad Gita and entitled the Ramana Gita. We are now meditating on the 8th chapter of Ramana Gita. The 8th chapter is Ashrama Vichara, or the stages of life as prescribed in tradition. These are Brahmacharya, Grahastha, Vanaprastha and Sannyasa. So Bhagavan begins the chapter. It's an answer to Karshni's question, but the question is not mentioned specifically here, but just mentioned that it is an answer to Karshni's question. And Bhagavan says that anyone who is ready and ripe, Pakko Brahma Vicharayet, anyone who is ripe, regardless of his station in life, regardless of gender, regardless of caste and creed, can inquire into the nature of the self, can engage in self-enquiry. This chapter 8 is a chapter immediately after the chapter on self-enquiry, as we have seen earlier. Then Bhagavan says, Sopanavat param praptum. These are steps. Steps for what? For attaining self-knowledge. These are steps for attaining self-knowledge. So, he is saying, Atyanta pakva chiktasya kramapekshana vidyati. There is no need for a step. If you are ready to dive into the self, dive into the self right here and right now, because the self is available right here, right now. If we are unable to hold the self because of the power or because of the tendencies, the power of the tendencies, the habit, the old habit of externalization, if thoughts begin to rise in our mind, then we have to apply the method which Bhagavan has given to us, the process of self-enquiry. Ask, for whom are these thoughts? They are for me. Who am I? So when we are asking who am I, the one who does not even know who I am, in what stage of life can he think himself to be? Can he think I am a sannyasi? Can he think I am a grahastha? Can he think I am a vanaprastha? I am a brahmachari? None of these would be relevant when one is asking oneself the question, who am I? When one is not practicing self-enquiry, then what are the external regulations which would be conducive to self-enquiry? These have been the questions in some of the earlier chapters as well. If one is ready for self-enquiry, in the chapter on self-enquiry itself, Karshni had asked, if one is ready for self-enquiry, is it a waste to follow all the rules and regulations? And Bhagavan says, no, they are all purificatory. So here he is saying, the stages of life have been traditionally designed in order to facilitate the practice of self-enquiry. From this answer, we have to go back to the answer in the 3rd chapter, which Bhagavan gave to Daivarata when Daivarata asked him, which is the most important duty? Mukhya kartavyam. And Bhagavan has said that abiding in the self is the highest duty for those who are desiring the highest. If you want the highest, then abiding in the self is the highest duty. So, all the norms, all the prescribed norms, including the stages of life, have been traditionally in the Indian ethos. They have all been designed to support the practice of self-enquiry and the experience of steady self-awareness. Everything has been designed only for that. During the course of my doctoral studies, I had chance to read some parts of a book by Ananda Kumaraswamy, which is called Dance of Shiva, which is about the Indian ethos. He says how even the culture in the Indian ethos is geared towards, is structured only for the highest. In that he points out that, say, in all our sculptures, our beautiful sculptures of Nataraja or any of the other deities, in all the marvelous temples, or even if we take the construction of the temple itself, the amazing architecture, we say, of the huge Brihadishwara temple, which it does not cast a shadow at any point of time. The temple tower, the Gopuram, does not cast a shadow at any point of time. But even that, Ananda Kumaraswamy points out, there is no signature anywhere. There is no name of the architect. There is no name of the Sapati. There is no signature anywhere. And this is the factor pointing to that the emphasis is on surrender. The individual does not exist. So he says everything in the ethos is geared only towards that. Similarly, Bhagavan is telling us over here also, Sopanavat param praptum. So we had looked at that earlier also, but again meditating on it, every verse over here is indicative of the fact that the all-important duty, the Mukhya Kartavyam, the important duty cast upon us is to abide in the self. So, Bhagavan says that it's okay if you're in any stage of life, that stage of life has actually been designed to help you abide in the self. So it can never be a hindrance for you. If you actually abide by the rules and regulations of that stage of life, it will be a support for the Atma Sadhana and it cannot be a hindrance. Na jnana pratikulata, because many devotees would ask him, there was one Sheshagiri Iyer, known by the pen name of Ramanadasa Sadananda, who also wanted to ask Bhagavan, should I take up sannyasa? Others have also asked. Then Bhagavan would say, well, what harm did your wife and children do to you? If you take up sannyasa, if you go to the forest and you're not ready and ripe, then what happens? Your mind will be running hither and thither. Sannyasa is, therefore he says here, sannyasa nirmalam jnanam. And if you are in any other stage of life, you practice the rules and regulations so that becomes a support for you as is designed and intended. But you may not abide by those rules and regulations. If you don't, then it could be a hindrance for you. So what are the rules and regulations? You have to maintain purity. So he says, as a brahmachari, brahmacharyena shuddhena, brahmacharyashrame yasya shakti rujrumbate vrataihi. All the vratas of brahmacharya should be followed. If all the vratas of brahmacharya are followed, there is celibacy, there is non-attachment, there is not taking of anything. We will not accept anything. Anything except food is not accepted. Gifts are not accepted or given. Money is not accepted or given. Like that, there are a few rules of brahmacharya. So if we follow all the rules and regulations of brahmacharya, And focus on vidya, vidyaya, jnana vriddhya cha, and let focus on the self awareness also. Then what happens? Sapaschat prajwalishyati. So that will lead to the mind shining, becoming pure and shining. So Bhagavan says there should be purity maintained. During brahmacharya ashrama, the, the, the vrata of celibacy should be maintained, and that should be maintained means it should be done. There should be purity of thought as well. And one should not seek anything other than the knowledge that one is practicing. If it is a scriptural knowledge, say if one is studying the scripture of Bhagavan, then one should be focused on studying the scripture of Bhagavan. If one is studying Shastra, one should be focused on the study of that Shastra as guided by the Guru. So there will be focus on the study and focus on practice also, says Bhagavan. Jnana vriddhya. One should keep on without a break, Bhagavan has said. But at least the steadiness in practice is very, very significant. In any practice, it is important. And in self-enquiry, it is very much a necessity that one should have steadiness in practice. The first stage of probably the pakwatva or the readiness to dive within is the need which will arise within us to perform the self-enquiry practice. We must have a need to do self-enquiry. We must want to do it. The more we want to do it, the more it will take us inward. So, jnana vriddhya. Then what happens? One becomes ready for the grihastha-ashrama, says Bhagavan. What is the grihastha-ashrama designed for? Why at all go to the grihastha-ashrama? It is not required. It is not required. So, it can be directly also, because Bhagavan says, no, this is not required. All this kramapeksha na vidyate, Bhagavan had already told us earlier. There is no hard and fast rule that you have to cross through each of these ashramas. But if it is happening by the course of destiny, that one is going through the next ashrama, the grihastha ashrama, one should again understand what is the purpose of the grihastha ashrama. Bhagavan says it is for sarvesham upakaraya. It is for the good of the entire society, to dedicate oneself to doing good to others, doing good for society. Dedicating oneself to that is the purpose of the grihastha ashrama, and sarvada vita sangasya, without any sense of attachment. It should be done without attachment. Sarvada vita sangasya, without any sense of attachment. One should engage oneself in the activities which are for the good of society. So one can say that it is the stage of karma yoga. In one sense, normally people say karma, bhakti, yoga and jnana. But one may say that the brahmacharya ashrama is either a preparation for these, or it is in itself, it is a sort of a yoga practice. It's a discipline. It's a disciplined part of the life. In this, it is action oriented. There also there will be actions. The action of studying will be there. In earlier days, there might have been the action of performing certain yajnas, learning to perform yajnas, etc. might have been there. Here also it is imbibing. It is a time of imbibing. Now, what does a grihastha do? The grihastha is no longer doing any study. Shravana is not happening. Shravana has happened as a student. Listening and understanding. Now manana has to happen. What is manana and nididhyasana? Manana is meditating, understanding the teaching and practicing. Practicing what? Practicing the salient aspect of nissanga, non-attachment. Now, what does non-attachment lead to in our, how will it have an impact on our self-inquiry? It will obviously have a wonderful effect on the practice of self-inquiry. Because why does thought arise in us? Thought arises only out of Sangha, out of attachment, out of a desire, a need to attain something. So when there is no need to attain something, there will be hardly any thoughts there. But there may be few thoughts, because if one is engaged in doing good also, one may have thoughts relating to this needs to be done today, or even if it is taking care of the family needs. Okay, this somebody in the family needs help, so I need to get this done now, or I need to get that done now. So these thoughts would most likely arise in us when we are engaged in activity. So that is the period of being a householder. A householder is one who is earning something, who is giving back, or one who is engaged in activity for the sake of society is also a kind of a householder, because that is the purpose of the householder ashrama. So all those who are engaged in activity for the sake of a higher good would fall into that category. And for all such, there is bound to be some process of thinking related to that activity. Albeit it may be with less attachment, one may not have a sense of anxiety or worry. If one does not have attachment, one will not have a sense of anxiety or worry about one's activities. Whether it's office work or whether it's work relating to the actual seva which is being done, there will not be any sense of anxiety, because it is Vita Sangha, there is no attachment. Then what happens? The thoughts, however, may be there, the planning may be there. So during all times, and especially during the time of self-inquiry, the Vita Sangha, the absence of attachment, must be carried further, not to be attached to the thought itself, not to be attached to the rise of the thought itself, to be able to let go the thought which is mine without being attached to it. So until I am attached to something, until I think I can do something through my thought, I am in the experience of the Grihastha Ashrama. So I am in one space where I think that these things are of value, they need to be done. But Bhagavan says Vita Sangha. So there has to be complete detachment from thought. When the thought arises, no attachment to pursue the thought. Let it drop through the question, for whom is this thought? Then no attachment to the identity who is having the thought. That has to be practiced through the question, who am I? And self-abidance will come about. Then Bhagavan says there is the next stage, which is the Vanaprastha, where activities are also renounced. And in the typical sense, Bhagavan says, tapastvashramah prokta tritiyah panditottamaihi abharyo va sabharyo va tritiyashrama bhag bhavet. The Vanaprastha ashrama, which is the time given totally only to spiritual practice. Now, no more concern about the world, no more concern about doing good to anyone. One is taken care of now by someone else who is the Grihastha. One has decided to dedicate oneself completely to spiritual practice and spiritual practice alone. That is the Vanaprastha ashrama. And that may be with one's partner or without one's partner. We find, of course, that when Yajnavalkya said he is going for that stage of practice, then Maitreyi said, I will come. So she said, I want to be a partner in your practice. If this is something so fantastic that you want to dedicate yourself to it, why should I also not do the same? And he then gave her the instruction. So this is abharyova sabharyova. That means one's partner may be there. Those who are those who are our partners, those who are surrounding us in our spiritual practice, may continue to be with us. This is also in the atmosphere of an ashrama. Those who are not necessarily sannyasis, but are all stationed together in an ashrama and are practicing the pursuit of self-enquiry. They may be said to be in the vanaprastha ashrama. The something strange in our life is we may go through we may be a brahmachari at one moment, we may be a grihastha at another moment, a vanaprastha at the third moment. But when this becomes the overriding mode of one's life, then we are said to be in that ashrama. So Bhagavan says that is the third ashrama. And when one starts such practice, where nothing else is anymore needed, when self-awareness alone is our goal, and as one keeps practicing in that steadiness, already one has practiced detachment. So in that when one does, then Bhagavan says the fourth ashrama will happen of its own accord. There is no need to plan sannyasa. He says, tapasa dagdha papasya pakva chittasya yoginah chaturtha ashramah kale swayameva bhavishyati. It happens of its own accord. It is said in the Veda, urvarukamiva bandhanat. Like the cucumber plant, the cucumber fruit moves away from the plant just gently of its own accord as the stem leaves it, even so automatically everything swayameva bhavishyati, says the fourth stage is not planned. That means up till that stage some amount of planning perhaps we are allowed to do, and the fourth stage happens automatically. So one need not worry. Till when? Till it happens automatically. Till everything drops off automatically. Till one gets into that nirmalam jnanam, which is the definition of sannyasa, which is given already. Till one gets into steady abidance of the self, one has to practice and practice and practice with purity and a sense of detachment, which will come automatically by His grace. That is why He has indicated this path to us. Om Namo Bhagavate Sri Ramana.
Namo Ramana. Apara Satchit Sukhavariraše Yasyormimatram Bhuvanam Samastam Guhahitam Tam Ramanam Radhiram Chinta